note of all emergency exits. Emergency exits are clearly marked with an illuminated sign above each doorway. Thank you and enjoy the program. Gracias por visitar Titan Student Union. Antes de que comience su evento, le pedimos que tome nota de todas las salidas de emergencia. Las salidas de emergencia están claramente marcadas con un letrero iluminado sobre cada entrada. Gracias y disfrute del programa.
Welcome, everybody. We're happy to have you. My name is Austin Isaias, the Student Programs and Engagement Manager here at ASI, and we are so thankful for you all to be here for Beyond the Conversation with Nikole Hannah-Jones. I wanted to start off with a thank you to the Vice President of Student Affairs in her office. Without her support, this is not possible, so thank you so much, Dr. Rowe, and all your team. So now let's get started with this event. So I want to introduce our ASI Student Body President, Lydia Kelly, who will be introducing our special guest tonight, Nikole Hannah-Jones.
Hello everyone, my name is Lydia Kelly and I'm the ASI Student Body President. Nikole Hannah-Jones is the distinguished guest I will be introducing tonight. Nikole Hannah-Jones is the Pulitzer Prize winning creator of the 1619 Project and a staff writer at the New York Times Magazine, the book version of the 1619 Project, and as well as the 1619 Project children's book, Born on the Water, were an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. Her 1619 Project is now a 6-part docuseries on Hulu. Hannah-Jones has spent her career investigating racial inequality and injustice, and her reporting has earned her the MacArthur Fellowship, known as the Genius Grant, a Peabody Award, 2 George Polk Awards, and the National Magazine Award 3 times. She also serves as the Knight Chair of Race and Journalism at Howard University, where she founded the Center for Journalism and Democracy. Hannah-Jones is also the co-founder of the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, which seeks to increase the number of investigative reporters and editors of color. And in 2022, she opened the 1619 Freedom School, a free after-school literacy program in her hometown of Waterloo, Iowa. Hannah-Jones holds a Master of Arts in Mass Communications from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and earned her BA in History and African American Studies from the University of Notre Dame. Titans, please give a warm welcome to Nikole Hannah-Jones.
No? Yes?
Yes.
Hey.
So, how are you feeling? Welcome to Cal State Fullerton.
Thank you. I feel great. The weather is fabulous.
Sunny 75.
Yes, definitely coming from New York. That's a vast improvement, so very excited.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to be here with you this evening and talk about your story and learn more about you. So, let's just go ahead and get started. Journalist, award-winning author, professor, now documentarian. Who is Nikole Hannah-Jones?
I didn't know we were doing an expose. I feel like my back is to the half. Can I turn this? Okay. All right. Sorry. I've been stumped. Are you a journalism major?
I started off as journalism.
I don't actually know how to answer that question. Yeah, I'm just a girl from Waterloo, Iowa. Y'all been there? Anybody been there? Y'all have not been to Waterloo, Iowa? Yeah, I'm just a girl who grew up in a no-name town in a flyover state who wanted to write about black folks and somehow turned it into an amazing career. But you know, I'm a human being. I'm like everyone. I have levels, most of which I won't discuss with y'all.
You know, I think you truly have such a unique perspective, and I think you have a multitude of experiences and range in different industries. And, you know, before we get into anything else, I think, how would you describe the 1619 Project and its importance?
So the 1619 Project is really, it's a work of journalism that seeks to center slavery as a foundational American institution and anti-blackness as foundational to the United States, and black contributions to basically argue there would be no America as we know it without black people. So the project, thank you, we can definitely clap for that fact. The project is attempting to unsettle our national narrative and our kind of collective memory of who we think we are as Americans. And it's often described as a history, but it's not. It's about America today. And so every essay looks at modern America and shows the way that slavery and its legacy has shaped these institutions, even though we often don't acknowledge it. So at its core, that's what it is. And then if you watch Fox News, it's a whole bunch of other things.
You know, I think you really do highlight such crucial topics that need to be discussed and talked about. And it's important to talk about the black influence and what it's had on America and what we are today. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about your documentary. And I want to talk about how, you know, you say on the documentary how black Americans have always had to fight to participate in this country's democracy. And can you kind of speak a little bit more on this idea of black Americans and the fight to participate and feel included in this democracy?
I mean, I would even, I would word that more strongly. I think black Americans are the reason we have democracy in America. That when you look at our founding, I mean, this really is where so much of the pushback against the project comes from, is we've all been indoctrinated into this idea that we were founded by these intrepid colonists who needed to break off from the British Empire to establish democracy and freedom. What we don't want to grapple with is that in America, democracy, right, freedom and slavery start at the same time. And that white freedom was predicated on black slavery. And of course, black slavery was predicated on the theft of indigenous lands, because you can't have slavery if you don't take the land first. So we have to acknowledge all of this, but we've only wanted to tell one part of that story. And just factually speaking, I mean, this is what's been so interesting about so much of the pushback against the project is it's really not about facts, it's about feelings. It's about the feelings we want to have about our country, because what happened, happened. And the men who founded our country were very explicit about who would participate in this republic, right? Who would be a voting citizen? Well, half the population, by virtue of being women, couldn't vote. Enslaved people, who were 1/5 of the population of the original 13 colonies, clearly couldn't vote. Indigenous people weren't even citizens, they were sovereign people. So we were a country that was founded on the idea that if you were white, male, and had land, you could participate, but that's not democracy. And black Americans, who were quite literally written either out of our founding documents or encoded as property, looked at those majestic words of our founding. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. And they said, well, that shit applies to us too. Right? And truly took those words and said, you didn't intend those words to include us. The we the people in the Constitution didn't include black people because black people were not considered people, but we knew that we were people. So the black rights struggle, going all the way back to revolutionary times, was expansive. It believed in true democracy. It understood that if you are on the bottom of society, if anyone above you doesn't have rights, then you automatically don't have any amongst your community, and going all the way to the present time. So we can look at the civil rights movement. How are you a democracy when an entire region of the country, people can't or have their vote violently suppressed, right? Across the American South, black people couldn't vote. It was during the civil rights movement and the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that we began to actually have a true multiracial democracy. And then we can just look at what happened in the last election, where it's black people, largely black women organizers in Georgia that saved democracy. It is Latino voters in Arizona and Nevada that saved democracy, right? It is the people who were left out of democracy that ultimately saved democracy again and again. And how could we better conceive of an America that looks very much like this room if we understood that?
Truly, thank you.
Which probably didn't even answer your question, but I tend to do that. I just say what I want to talk about. Sorry.
You did great. No, honestly, thank you for giving us a glimpse into the 1619 Project, and I think you really aim to share the truth and speak truth to your power and to share a story. And I think one thing that I can recall is, you spoke about your father and how he was in the military and how he would fight for a country where he did not feel supported in the country and still have the American flag held, although he did not feel supported in the country that he was fighting for. So truly, thank you for sharing that. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about these stories, and within the 1619 Project, when you were discovering the stories and, talking about the ancestry information, how were you able to manage your own personal emotions as you're uncovering, these stories?
So one thing that, can we just give her a shout out? It is not easy to interview. Seriously. I'm like, I've been a professional journalist for 20 years, and I hate interviewing journalists. So I just have to give you much respect. It's not easy thing to do. What was your question?
So it's a little bit of a deeper dive into the 1619 Project and how you kind of maintained your own emotions throughout the story.
So what I was going to say before I wanted to give you some laurels is I don't ever really try to separate my emotion from the work. And I know that in journalism schools where we're taught to believe in these ideas of objectivity and that we have to be the neutral observer, but I don't come from that tradition. I really see my work in the tradition of the Black press, which could not pretend to be neutral while reporting on a country that was denying us our very humanity and rights as citizenry. So I think what's important for me is it's actually the rage at the injustice that I see in the world and that I know we choose that fuels the work that I do. So I don't try to pretend that when I'm writing about school segregation, I'm not angry that we're depriving children of their right to have a quality education, or when I write about housing segregation, or when I write about policing, that I don't feel a sense of rage. Now, acknowledging that to me is actually important, because so often journalists pretend that they're objective. I don't believe objectivity in human beings is possible. I mean, think about anything. The only thing that most of us can be objective about are things that we don't know anything about. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as we know enough about something, we have an opinion about it. So much of journalism is pretending that we don't have opinions and emotions and feelings about things. And by pretending, I think that we're not able to report against our biases. But when you acknowledge, actually, I do feel this way about this, then you can ensure that you have objectivity of method. Objectivity of method is, am I fair? Am I accurate? Are my facts right? But I don't believe that a journalist who covers child protective services is uncovering, the way that that institution fails children just because they think it's a cool thing for people to know. They do that because they want that institution to protect children, right? You are becoming a journalist to me because you want to hold power accountable. So the hardest thing for me is not to succumb then to the emotion of the work, right? Like it is hard. This project, emotionally, the 1619 project, and I never cover happy stories. It's not what I do. So all my stories, right, are emotional and about injustice. That's why I became a journalist. But this in particular, spending years just immersed in the depravity of slavery and apartheid and all of the barbarism and horrors that Black Americans have had to live with over centuries, and then knowing, like, I'm not just talking about people in the abstract, I'm talking about my own family. That emotionally was very taxing, and I can't say I always know how best to deal with those emotions, even at 25 years old. But I feel the way that I best cope with it is, one, I remind myself that on my worst day, my life is easy, right? So if I want to start feeling bad, like this work is hard, I think about my grandmother, Arlena Tillman, born on a cotton plantation in Greenwood, Mississippi, 4th grade education, worked as a sharecropper and then a domestic, and how am I complaining about my life is hard, right? So it's not to diminish the emotional impact that our work has or the suffering of any person today, but it's to have perspective, right? That in the end, I get paid to read a lot of books, talk to people, and write stories that I think are important. And every day, that really feels like a blessing, even when it gets hard.
Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and opening up and kind of sharing a little bit more that at the end of the day, we're all kind of a part of this human experience, and for providing insight to our students in the College of Communications and who are journalists and aspire to pursue journalism. And sometimes you do have those moments where you kind of have to stand alone. And I think you were able to kind of share that you can't fully separate your emotions. There's always going to be some sort of, piece of emotions in your work. And so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. I kind of want to talk a little bit about journalism and your career, and kind of, now that we've kind of discussed a little bit of, the hard times, how have you found the strength when your work has become difficult?
I don't really need strength to do my work. I mean, I really do feel, let me go again. I mean, I always am grounded in my own family. I am from Waterloo, Iowa. This is a blue-collar town. Most of my family, worked in meat packing plants or chicken processing plants. When, during COVID, when the Tyson plants were not implementing COVID procedures, my uncle was in that plant, right? So my 60-something-year-old uncle. So again, like, I don't feel motivated or I don't ever have to try to motivate myself because what I do is easy. Like, I actually get to do for a living. Like, sometimes it's wild to me that I get paid to do what I do. It's like, I literally I read books and I read research, and when I see something in the world that I don't like or I think is unfair, I don't ever feel powerless about it, because I have a tremendous megaphone and I can go write something and make people see it or have to deal with it. So there's never a day where I wake up worried about how do I drag myself into my work. I'm one of those depressingly rare people who gets to do what I love for a living, and to do work that is important, that I know matters. So that part is That part is easy. In fact, sometimes the hard thing is like not to want to work all the time. To like take a pause and enjoy more frivolous things like shopping. That part's not actually that hard. That I lied. That was kind of a lie. But you know, but really, in all sincerity, I am tremendously grateful. I know what hard work looks like. And I also think it's important because there are students here. For most of my adult life, I mean, I started work when I was 11 years old. I had a paper route. 13 years old, I was detasseling corn. Y'all know what that? Yeah, y'all don't know what that is. Field work, like literally, you know, you can work before the age of 16 if you work in agricultural work. And my parents couldn't buy me the things that I wanted, so I started working in the summer in cornfields. I worked 2 jobs till I was 30 years old. I had a master's degree, and I was working at a newspaper by day and selling mattresses on nights and weekends to make ends meet. So I know what hard work looks like, and I know what my life looks like now, and I just feel very blessed with what I've been able to accomplish personally, but extremely motivated in understanding that there are just as many talented, ambitious people in communities like mine who never make it out, and I have to do my work on behalf of them.
I want to kind of touch base on, you know, students and the student perspective of managing your day-to-day jobs. You know, we have students here that may work multiple jobs to have an education. And, you know, as you were answering the question, I kind of thought, you know, what is some advice you have for people to not necessarily overwork themselves and almost like find the beauty in your passion of like what you were born to do? Like, what advice do you have for someone to not necessarily overwork themselves, and advice for that person that's, you know, working multiple jobs to survive and have food on the table and also still attend university?
I'm not going to have good advice on this. Right, because I understand that hunger that comes from growing up in a family that struggled, and I also understand when you are often, as I was, one of the few people who made it to college, the pressure not to let your family down, right? Like your family who's invested in you, your family whose hopes in many ways, fairly or unfairly, are hooked to you, right? Like if you are one of the only ones in your family who have gone to college, then everyone is looking at you to be the one who makes it. And that pressure I think it depends on how one internally responds to that pressure, because that pressure can be debilitating or it can be extremely motivating. And I do think balance is important, but also these are the hungry years. Like, these are the years when I worked 2 jobs in college. And let me be clear, I'm not the person who's like, because I had to struggle, y'all should struggle too. I don't believe that at all. I don't. I shouldn't have had to work 2 jobs and still take out student loans that I just paid off 3 years ago, right? I'm not arguing that. But I'm also saying, and I know, you know, so many of the students at this school are first generation, right? They're not coming from families with money. They're not coming from families where when you want to get your internship, your dad just calls somebody and you get the internship. Like, you're going to have to make your own way. And so you're going to have to do what you came here to do. And even if it's hard and it's not fair, if you're going to succeed, that's what you're going to have to do. What I do hope, though, is that you can look at me and know that it won't always be this hard. That if you invest in yourself in this way, right, that you can make it to where you want to be. But it's going to be a struggle for us. It just is. And as soon as you accept that, then you do what you came to do and understand that this is a temporary situation for long-term gain.
Thank you so much for speaking on that, because I think it's really important to highlight that, especially since we are a university, you know, where 30% of our students are first generation. So they might not understand, you know, where to go for advising or, you know, certain college tools, you know. So I think,
can I speak on that, though?
Yeah. Oh,
please. So I did not take advantage of what my university offered me. Like, I did not know what I didn't know that I needed, so I never went to career services, for instance, right? I didn't go to the people whose job it was to literally help a student like me figure out how to get that internship, how to get that edge. And I maybe wouldn't have been working 2 jobs at 30 years old had I done that, right? So sometimes when you come from that background, you don't want to admit what you don't know. Or you feel like if I acknowledge that I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to write a resume, I don't know how to, my hardest thing was going to a job fair and not knowing how to small talk people. Like, I was like, this feels like brown nosing. Like, I don't want to talk to you. It feels fake. Like, I didn't know how to do it, but people who did were getting the calls. I wasn't. That we don't want to admit what we don't know because we already feel like maybe I'm not supposed to be here. And if I admit what I don't know, then everyone else will know that I'm not supposed to be here too. And you end up hurting yourself, right? That I don't even know if it's pride. I don't think it's pride. I think it's shame. That prevents us from really accessing people who are here to help someone just like you. So I know this talk is not supposed to be like a career counseling talk, but I just try to be real about what the struggles were. So I graduated from Notre Dame with no resume, no internship, and no marketable skills because I was a history and African American studies major. Now, it's a great major now. But when I was 21 trying to get a job, and I was like, well, what can I do with this? And had I talked to my career counselors, had I done some internships, I would have known what I could do with that. So that did mean that it took me longer really to get started where I wanted to be. So just please, like, there's no shame in admitting, like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I need advice, because just from the small number of staff that I have interacted with here, it's clear that they are here because this also is their sense of mission and like they want to help y'all. I'm gonna get back on track. Sorry, I'm gonna get back on track.
No, honestly, I think it flows well. I think, talking about that sense of community and finding your community in college is so important. Like, here we have our diversity resource centers where students can go into a place. Yes, shout out Dirk. We have our African American Resource Center. We have a place where, our students can go and feel that sense of community and earn their programming or understand programming and just have that sense of community and build relationships, and not only sustainable through college, but those lifelong opportunities. And I kind of want to build on this topic of community. How has working on topics like racial justice and Black America isolated you and made you almost grow, or if it has made you grow a sense or a stronger sense to your community because of your work?
So when you say isolated, from whom or what?
Just making the overall, has it made you feel isolated? Has working on topics like racial justice made you feel isolated in your work? And has it helped you grow a stronger sense of community?
So I would say that, so it depends on what you mean by isolated and isolated from whom. Because certainly, when I started out as a journalist, and again, I became a journalist because I wanted to write about Black people and I wanted to write about race, and there were newsrooms that didn't necessarily value that in me, right? So what often is the case, and many of you will find when you go out into the working world, is that many places want phenotype diversity. So they want to be able to check off a box and say, we have one of those, one of those, one of those. But they don't want you to actually bring, right, the mind and the experience that the diversity has wrought. And I was never one of those journalists who said, I just want to be a journalist. No, I'm a Black journalist. Like that is why I became a journalist. That's what I want to write about. And so I definitely was isolated at times in my career because either editors felt that my wanting to write about Black people was a sign of my bias, or didn't feel like that's a way you can rise in your career. Now, I wrote about everything. My my focus, like the thing that I was passionate about, was writing about race and racial inequality. But I wrote about everything. But it was only a problem that I wanted to focus on Black people. But that said, well, clearly they were wrong. Let's just point that out. Right, like all of my work that I'm known for is because I refused to let them tell me that what was important for me to write about wasn't important. But I feel like my work has expanded my community. I mean, it's been amazing, really. The way that people have responded to the work, the way the work has been embraced, and that I now have, this entire communities of people I've never met, and I never will meet most of them, who message me, who comment, who send an email. Now, I also have community who send me hate mail, but I'm not talking about those, because it all comes. You get one, you get the other, but in the kind of darkest times, and there have been dark moments since the project came out. I mean, the threats, as much as I walk around with bravado when the President of the United States targets your work, that's scary. And in some of those really dark times, though, it has been community. It has been the people who both vocally and just personally said, like, your work matters. We have your back. There's folks who are watching and looking out for you, that I understood how big my community is. And that's because I think most Americans want to grapple more truthfully with who we are as a country. I think many Americans are perplexed about how we can be both so great and yet allow so much suffering and allow so many really terrible things to be done in our name. So we're a country that can be amazingly generous and at the same time be amazingly cruel. And people want to understand why that is. And I think most Americans want to build a better country, but we just have been ill-equipped to understand how to do so.
I want to commend you for talking about, the diversity hires and the truth behind that, and where sometimes you may look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, am I being hired because you need to hit your quota for females in this workplace, or am I being hired because of the quality of my work? So truly thank you for highlighting that and speaking to, where you found your community. And I want to kind of talk about your work. When you're writing and you're curating stories, what are some of the guiding principles that you have for your stories?
Okay, I'm going to answer that, but I got to go back to the diversity hire comment first. First of all, not ever for one damn moment have I ever worried about whether or not I was somebody's diversity hire. Because what I know is if I'm even in the space to get this job, and I know what it took me to get there, I'm qualified to get this job, right? So this is the psyche of a nation where for the vast history of our country, affirmative action only worked one way and for one people. And none of those people, you think all 44 or 43 presidents that came before Obama were the most qualified human beings in the United States to get those jobs? But do you think a single one of them said, I probably got this job because I'm a white male? I mean, seriously. Right? So they want us to be convinced that somehow, and we're still underrepresented in every area that matters, that somehow we are being given something that we don't deserve. Don't internalize that. Now, if they want to think what they want to think, that's fine. Hire me however you think you're going to hire me, and I'm going to blow the socks off this shit either way, right? So I just always think about the prophet James Brown. And James Brown said, you don't have to give me nothing, just open the door and I'll get it myself. Thank you. Somebody said that lyric. Who was that? I heard somebody. So it's so important when I'm in rooms like this to tell students of color particularly, or women, or any student from a marginalized group, don't let people put that in your head. Don't allow that. Maybe to you, they're diversity hire. But here's what I know. If I'm not at the New York Times, the 1619 Project doesn't happen. It just doesn't, right? It doesn't exist. So we bring something important in every space that we're in, and whether it's valued as it should be or not, that's not my concern. And that shouldn't be your concern either. These institutions excluded people of color for the vast history that they existed. That was affirmative action. Letting us in to institutions that we should have already been a part of is not affirmative action to me. And we cannot fix a race-specific system of inequality by pretending that race no longer exists. I'm just not interested in that. So I'm gonna get to your question, but I just don't want, that's like my biggest pet peeve, because this is, I always say white supremacy is like water, it will always find its level. So if we're not in those spaces, it's because we don't want to work hard. If you want to work hard, you have any opportunity you want. And then if we get in those spaces, it's because we didn't deserve it. So how do we win that game? Make it make sense, right? So either I'm absent because I don't want to work for it, or I'm here because I don't deserve it. You can't win that game, so don't even play it. I don't like to play a rigged game. Now, once again, I've forgotten what the actual question was.
No, I'm really grateful.
Y'all are never inviting me back again. You're like, this chick.
You're all good. No, I'm really grateful you spoke to that, because I think that's a stigma that a lot of students face. So thank you truly for speaking to that topic. The question was, when you're writing and creating these stories, what are some of the guiding principles that you have?
Okay, I'm gonna answer that, but I wanna say something else first. Just playing, I'm playing. I'm actually gonna answer it this time. Y'all thought you were coming for a little dry academic lecture, huh? So when I'm looking at stories, I'm always looking for, actually, thank you, that's a great question. I love talking about craft, which I don't get to do that much anymore. So I write about racial inequality. And my biggest pet peeve with how so much writing about racial inequality is that I always feel it's very superficial. That it's basically a cataloging of maladies, right? So Black people are suffering from this, Latinos are at the bottom of this indicator. We know that. That's not useful to me. What's useful is to say, how is this happening? Why is this happening? And who is making it so? So whenever I am going to write a story, I early in my career wanted to show that you could treat racial inequality as an investigative beat, that it wasn't just about disparity, but that there are systems and structures, there are policies, there are policy makers who are causing the disparity or upholding the disparity. So the first thing that I'm always thinking of when I decide if I want to be a story or not is, what can I prove? Not just what can I catalog, but what can I prove? Can I show that someone has done something intentional, that there's some policy behind it, that there's a history behind it? And then once I have figured out, can I do something that is investigative, that actually would lead to some accountability, then I'm really looking for narrative. So one thing as an investigative reporter is, you can do the most damning investigation, but if the shit is dry, people won't read it, right? They just won't. I've seen so many, amazing investigative reporting pieces, but people can't get through them. So I'm also always then thinking as a narrative writer, what are the compelling human stories that I can get to illuminate this larger issue? And can I thread that story all the way through? Because a technique, of course, in journalism is the anecdotal lead. You have this anecdote, and then everything else is dry, and then I'll give you a little bit of anecdote at the end. Well, people aren't going to make it to the end. And there's this thing, are there student journalists in here? Yes, best profession in the world. So have y'all heard of chart beat? Yes? Okay. So for those who don't know, chart beat is the most depressing thing you've ever seen if you're a journalist, because it tells you how long people stay in your stories. It charts them. When someone clicks your story online, it'll tell you exactly how many minutes they read and where in the story they jumped off. So I don't look at it. So I don't like torture, right? But you realize, an investigative reporter might spend 9 months investigating a single story, and then someone spends 1 minute and 30 seconds in it. That's writing, right? You have to be able to have a compelling story that keeps people's interest. So those are really the key things that I'm always looking for in a story. Is it surprising? That's the third thing, is I like to tell stories that everyone thinks they know, but they don't. So when I started writing about school segregation, and I was pitching a story about how the South was resegregating, and the editor was like, yeah, we know. We already know that story. I said, okay, tell it to me then. And of course they didn't, right? So you have to take these things that's basically what the 1619 Project is. You think you understand capitalism? Well, you don't. You think you understand democracy? Well, you don't. That to me is compelling journalism, because it forces us to think, which a lot of what we read and consume these days does not force us to think. And it forces us then to question, which the highest calling to me of journalism, is to inform and to make people inherently skeptical of power and institutions. So those are really the three things that I'm always looking for in a story.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Y'all don't have to clap after everything. It's okay. I know y'all here. You can, but you don't have to.
I find that very insightful for our communication students and specifically our journalism students. And I kind of want to get into this idea of telling a story, but to our younger generation. So we're going to shift into a little bit of a discussion on your children's book. So when discussing Born on the Water with the younger generation, what do you believe is the main points that a child should walk away with?
So if you don't know, we do have a children's book version of the 1619 Project. It's called Born on the Water. And I don't write fiction, and I'm not a children's book author. So it was a really amazing experience. I knew immediately when we decided to do a children's book that I needed to be partnered with an actual children's book writer. I try not to have too much hubris, like I know what I don't know. And so we partnered with Renee Watson, who is an award-winning children's book author, and we co-wrote the book together. And the main thing that I want, so there's two groups of children to me. There's Black American children, specifically Black American children who descend from American slavery, and then there's every other child. And for Black American descendants of slavery, I want them to go away from this book feeling that they have their own lineage and their own legacy and their own proud history, which seems like a simple thing. But when you are a Black child in this country, so the book opens with a very common assignment in American classrooms, which is the teacher to talk about the great American melting pot, asks every child to draw the flag of their native country. And of course, the Black child cannot, because the Black child has no idea. And the Black American child specifically, because if you are the child of Black immigrants, then you claim Trinidad or Jamaica or the Dominican Republic, but the Black American descendant of slavery has no other country. And that's such an alienating experience for Black American children. And further just feeds into this sense that we are people without a history, that there's something shameful that happened to us because we descend from slavery. So I really wanted this book to give us a sense of our own lineage and our own origin story, and to ultimately say, our native flag is the American flag, because we built this country. And because that middle passage that they thought was taking away our identity actually helped us forge a new identity. And then for every other child, what I've thought about a lot in the work that I do is, yes, Black children's perceptions of race and Black people are being shaped in the silences, but so are everyone else's perceptions of Black people being shaped in the silences. And so it's not just Black children who grow up thinking there's something shameful about Black American heritage, that Black people don't have a past or a history or lineage in this country. And so that shapes how then you interact. Part of the Americanization process, if you are an immigrant from another country, is to learn who to stay away from. That if you want to ascend in this country, you better not associate with those people on the bottom. And that Black people have, you were born into this country and don't take advantage of everything that my family came here to get. So I want children who are not Black to also have an understanding of the singular experience of Black Americans, that we're the only group of people who came from other shores by force, who didn't want nor choose to be a part of America, and that lineage matters. It is a distinct experience, and I want them to be able to see in their own family's immigration story, the story of the Black people who are already here. So that's why I wrote that book. I really wrote that book to my younger self in many ways.
Let's touch on that last sentence you said. You said you wrote this book to a version of your younger self. Why do you think that it's important for children to learn at such a young age and in the form of a picture book? Kind of what are the motivations in writing this?
Yeah, so really two big things. One, our children are being racialized and are going out into a racialized world whether we teach it to them or not. So much of, the debate, if I could call it that today, around so-called critical race theory, the critical race theory propaganda campaign, these legislation against divisive concepts, is pretending that we have to protect children from learning these hard histories when children are already seeing these things. I mean, I remember, Laquan McDonald, who was shot 16 times by police in Chicago. And we're having breakfast, and I watch the news every morning, and they play the video. And I'm not prepared to have this conversation about this Black boy getting shot at morning breakfast, but it comes on television. And so my daughter wants to know, what did he do? And I have to tell my child there's nothing that this child could have done to make him deserving of being shot 16 times by the police. So then, why then? Then I have to tell my child because he's a Black boy in America. So our children don't have the luxury of not being taught about race and the history of race and having to deal with that, because our children are going into a world where they see that. So to me, I would rather, I like to say, I call it whisper armor onto my child, that I have to arm her for the world before the world teaches her the lesson. And I think all of us as parents, no matter what race your child is, some of us have to give up our child's innocence earlier than others, which is unfortunate. But I actually think we all then don't prepare our children for the real world when we lie to them. Our children are actually, the beauty of children is they have a very clear sense of right and wrong. Like, we make a lot of excuses as adults. Kids do not. Seriously, why didn't you give that homeless man money when he was hungry? Try answering that question to a child, because the child is very clear. They're like, but you just wasted $5 on this, right? Like, they have a very clear sense of right and wrong, but they also are able to deal with really complex, emotional, like they can get it. Like, I remember my daughter used to always be like, is this person good or bad? Like, she came home talking about George Washington. But in my household, when when the teacher teaches you about George Washington, she's gonna be like, well, what about, all the people he owned? And she asked me, well, was he good or bad? And I'm like, well, you can't really put people in boxes that way. Most people are capable of really good things, and people are also capable of really bad things. And outside of Donald Trump, no one's either good or bad. Right, so I say all that to say, I remember, and I write about this in the preface of the book, growing up a black girl in Waterloo, Iowa, and never seeing folks like me in the story ever. And being so happy during Black History Month when we learned about 5 black people who did something of note. You get a message from that, and the message is the reason they're not teaching you about black people is because clearly black people must not have done much. And I'm sure there are lots of students in this room, Latino, Asian, black students, who grew up never seeing anybody like you in the American story or in any story, in the world story. You get a message from that. So we can either have kids who grew up like I did, who felt really degraded by what we were learning in school, really diminished by it, really feeling like maybe we are inferior, like maybe we haven't really done anything important. Or you can teach students from a young age, and you don't have to then re-educate them when they get older or fix all the hurt and harm that's been done as to children. So that to me is why having these stories so early is important. When you are white in this country, I think it can be very hard to understand what it's like to be rendered invisible. You don't know what that's like. And I believe every person deserves to see themselves in the story. White people, queer people, you name it, because that's how we all connect to our shared humanity. So because our children are going into a world that doesn't make sense if we don't teach these histories, we're actually depriving our children, I think, of something really fundamental: the ability to have empathy, the ability to have understanding, the ability to go into a multiracial world and understand that everyone has contributed something important to our society. So let's not fix broken adults. Let's try to build whole and healthy children.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you highlighted a great point in that children are exposed at such a young age, especially with the media and being exposed to technology. They're able to see things more so than previous generations. Specifically on the book, can you share some of the similarities and differences between these works in the book and the 1619 Project? Kind of like maybe some similarities and differences between the two, of Born on the Water and 1619 Project.
They're completely different because one's a picture book,
yeah,
and one's tens of thousands of words. So they're very different. I would say the children's book is basically taking the democracy essay and turning it into something digestible for children. But we also, the 1619 Project is a podcast, and now it's also a documentary series, a 6-part documentary series on Hulu. Thank you. The last 2 episodes came out today, Fear and Justice, and they're based on 6 of the essays in the book. And to me, every iteration of the project, you get to tell the story in a slightly different way. But what I love about the documentary series is many people are visual learners, right? It can be hard to sit and focus on. I'm a writer, so I do want y'all to read the book. But I do understand, people need to get the information in different ways. And for every episode, we did on-the-ground reporting, so you meet people that you didn't meet in the book or the podcast. We visually tried, if you read the book, then we have poetry and prose to kind of break up the essay. So we try to do that with music and interstitials in the documentary series. And you get to see all of my different Jordans that I wear in every episode.
Thank you so much for answering that. I really appreciate it. You're so inspirational with all of the work that you've done, and I want to take some time in the last couple minutes that we have to kind of do a round of
I think she's trying to tell questions. You to cut. Are you?
That was it.
She was
round
like-
of speed questions. Kia was ready to take the mic over here.
We were about to have an Apollo moment. Somebody was about to get the hook.
I think we're going to take some time to do a round of speed questions. So this is just
Oh, we are doing that. Okay.
off the top of your head, what you can think of when I ask you the questions, okay? So we'll get started here. Your favorite movie of all time?
Malcolm X.
Your favorite TV show?
Ooh, that one. Now see. Roots. Just playing. No, I'm playing. No, I love Roots, but no. What's my favorite TV show? My favorite TV show right now, I don't have a favorite TV show of all time, but my favorite TV show right now is Snowfall.
Favorite book of all time?
The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. And the Bible. Just playing.
Favorite
Nothing wrong with the Bible, it's just not my favorite book.
favorite food you've cooked?
Oh, that I've cooked. It's supposed to be a speed round, and I'm not even being speedy on this. Sorry. I don't have a favorite food that I cook, but I have a favorite food that people like me to cook, which is I have the best 7-Up pound cake in America.
Ooh, that does sound.
Anybody want to challenge me? Anyone? No. In America. Okay.
Awesome. I think that those are all the questions for the speed round. I do want to give the audience some time to ask some questions, so I'll hand the mic over to Kia.
Let's give a round of applause, please. We want to thank you, Nikole, for all of your insight, and just thank you for standing in the gap in so many ways, and we really appreciate you. We're going to take the opportunity for some students to ask a few questions, so raise your hand, and we will have, I got a young lady right here. Come on over here.
Can I touch the mic?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm a journalism student. Woo woo. You gave advice to students in general, but I kind of want specific advice for Black journalism students going into the field with limited experience. And what do you want to tell us about feeling like we're not the diversity hire, and what else? And I am not finished with the 1619 project, but girl.
And what's your name?
Oh, I'm Helena Carnes-Williams.
Thank you.
Okay, well, one, very happy to know that you want to be a journalist. I really do think it's one of the most important professions because, as my spiritual godmother said, the people must know before they can act, and there's no educator like the press. So we play a really pivotal role in democracy, but also in liberation struggles. Really happy about that. It's hard for me to give really general advice. What I will say is, as an old school print reporter, I just think it's so important to just go do journalism, to go into a small newsroom, which nobody likes to hear, and learn, how to be a cops reporter. Learn how to do a public records request. Like, it's not sexy. Journalism is a trade. And what put me in a position to do the big work that I have been able to do is I started by just getting the basic grounding in journalism to become a really good journalist. Now, as a Black journalist, I'll say you're going to have to learn to pick your battles, which is something I'm sure you have probably heard before. You're going to have to give them a lot of what they want so you can do what you want. But if you give them what they want and do it really well, then you set yourself up for success to do the things that you ultimately want to do. Don't ever put your name, though, on a story that you're not proud of. And there will be times, and I certainly learned this, where sticking to yourself, your morals and your ethics will cost you. And I think we all have to make a decision, is success worth it if you have to sell yourself out to get it? And I would say no.
Thank you. One more question. Young man, come see me.
feel like the price is right.
Thank you so much for having me ask this question. I thought that your quote about white supremacy being like water is perfect because here in California, it has taken roots in attacking affirmative action. It actually failed in this last referendum as a measure here in California. And now it's all the way up to the Supreme Court against your old campus, UNC. And how would you give advice to us as journalists, student journalists, who want to shed a light on that, but the powers that be, the top brass editors are saying, maybe this isn't really the issue, like you're pushing, you're being too opinionated. How would you give us advice to push back on that when we want to shed light on how white supremacy is like water? It's adapting, it's attacking affirmative action, but it's disguising itself as we're pitting against like, oh, it's anti-Asian now. How would you give us advice for that? And my name is David Nunez.
Hi, David. That's such an important question, and so much of your career as a journalist, again, particularly when you come from a marginalized group and you want to tell stories about marginalized people, is trying to convince other people that these stories are worthy and that telling them the way that you think they need to be told are worthy. So what you have to learn is I learned how to report around every objection I knew they were going to make, right? So think strategically. You already know, or if you don't, what are they going to say? What's their objection going to be? What are they going to argue about why this isn't a story? And then I'm going to have an answer to that before I ever pitch something to you. Preparation, it's not going to get you a yes every time, but my advice in general is make yourself undeniable, right? Make your stories undeniable, make yourself undeniable. You might still be denied, right? This is the real world, but it won't be for anything that you didn't do. In general, we can only control that which is in the spectrum of our control. So those things that you can control, do your absolute best. Like that argument, do you have studies, right? Have you already found a way to bulletproof the story against, well, it's anti-Asian? Well, there's lots of research. One, the majority of Asian Americans support affirmative action. Let's start with that, right? Let's start with the basic facts of in the Harvard and the UNC cases, they actually showed that the people who were getting the most benefit were white legacy admits. So bring those types of counterfactual arguments as you are trying to pitch the story. And as a dogged reporter, they tell you, no, just keep coming back. I like to wear people down, right? So, okay, what's your objection to this? Get the specific objection, then go do some reporting so when you come back, you can answer that objection. If they object again, keep coming back if it's a story that you really think should be told, because I feel like you bring a valuable perspective to that story, okay? Thank you.
At this time, we are going to say thank you first to Lydia Kelly for an amazing interview. Thank you, Lydia. And to Nikole Hannah-Jones. Anyone who has brought a book or anything to be signed, Nikole will be signing books. There is a line set up. You can exit on this far left door here, and you can have your book signed, but you will have to line up that way. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Lydia.